What's up, everyone? How's it going? I hope you're all doing great and that you're following the 3H's of the channel. And in this video, I have a variety of encounters and stories that are really weird and bizarre and terrifying. All of those words that I use in my titles, But if that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a stump with me and let's get into it. Thank you for watching. So a few years ago, me and my friends were hiking on Rock Island. Rock Island is a wilderness island in Lake Michigan that you need to take 2 boats to even get to. The island has an old lighthouse and ruins from a small civilization that used to live out there. So at this time, I was hiking around the island with 2 girls that I knew. We were walking down the trail and passing by some old 1800s cemetery that you can kind of see through the forest. And while doing this, I get a strange feeling, like there's somebody that's trying to get my attention. I look back to my right, straight into the thick forest, and I see a little girl lean out from behind a tree. She's wearing an old tattered nightgown. She's leaning out from behind the tree for maybe 2 seconds, and then sinks back into the tree. I do a double take. It's kind of hot outside, and I only slept for 5 hours the night before, so I thought that maybe I was just seeing things. So thinking this, I didn't say anything to the other 2 girls. We keep walking, maybe another mile or so. We come to this viewing point where we're standing on this giant bluff that's looking at the lake. I was kind of creeped out by what I saw, but I also didn't want to weird out the girls in case that I really was just seeing things. One of the girls looks down for a second. She says, "Man, so weird. I looked down the trail and I could have sworn that I saw a little girl in a nightgown walking toward us. Then she vanished." I say, "Holy shit, I just saw the same thing earlier, but I didn't want to say anything." We all, collectively, freak out. We decide to take a shortcut to get back and catch the next boat to another non-wilderness island. A couple days later, I get back home, and I investigate what we saw on the internet. It turns out that Rock Island is very haunted, and that people have seen children playing near the 1800s cemetery. I know this isn't scary for most people, but for us, especially for me, seeing a girl peek out behind a tree and then sink back into it still gives me shivers. We live in a small town considered semi-rural, over an hour outside of Houston, Texas. My son is 14. His 2 best friends are 13 and 14. They are your typical country kids who fish and explore the creeks around our neighborhood almost as much as they play video games. They're into fishing, camping, bushcraft, just really outdoorsy teens who generally keep out of trouble and just go fishing a lot. They're good, honest kids. Our neighborhood is about 150 acreage home sites, with the smallest being 1 acre and the largest being around 20 acres. There's lots of woods, tall pine trees, and creeks. The neighborhood is basically surrounded by wooded floodplain where nothing can be built, and lots of intertwining creeks that flood in heavy rains. There are literally thousands of deer. The soil is sandy loam, and the height above sea level might be 600 feet or so there's no caves that I'm aware of. Around 2 months ago, my son came home and told me that he had seen a glimpse of something in the woods. All 3 boys were at a part of the creek that they had not frequented much before. My son glanced up and saw the nude and unusually light grayish-skinned back of an extremely thin humanoid. It seemed to be 4 to 5 feet tall and moving away from them, slouching, moving in a weird, distinct way on all 4s with really long arms. He directed his friend's attention to it, but it was just a glimpse as it moved away from them, and then behind some brush next to a large, thick old tree, and just seemed to be gone. They didn't hear it move off or see anything else. The reason he felt comfortable telling me is because I had already warned him that there were things living in the woods that we share this planet with. My great uncle, who lived to 83, spent his entire retirement, quote, deer hunting. with little more than binoculars on his property in north central Texas. He clocked literal decades sitting in tree stands in the woods, and once, when I was there in my early 20s, he told me that there were things in these old woods that we don't even know about, but they're there. I'm certain that he had seen things, creatures. I passed the verbal knowledge and warning onto my outdoor-loving son around age 12, in the hopes that it would help him stay calm and not fear nature forever after if he ever saw anything in the woods. And then a few days later, my son and his 13-year-old friend were back fishing the creek, just the two of them. They had been exploring in the sandy creek bottom, crouched over, looking at things in the water. They got hungry, so they packed up their small gear items, a minnow net, Easter candy trash, to head home. My son stood up while putting on his day pack and locked eyes with this gray-skinned thing that was watching them. It was peeking out from behind a tree, and as my son saw it, he said that it ducked its head behind the tree impossibly fast. My husband and I were outside our home when he rode up on his bike. The creek area is accessible from one of the neighborhood cul-de-sacs. His pants were fully drenched, and he looked like he had fallen in or scrambled through the water and the sandy banks pretty good. I sent him in to shower, suspecting nothing and kind of distracted by my need to begin preparing Easter dinner at the time. Later, when it was just us, he told me what happened. The thing was watching my kid, my only child. He had told his friend that he had just seen it watching them, and they immediately left the creek area. His friend clearly being able to hear the truth in the tone of my son's voice and not wanting to stick around. But yet again, he described it as looking to be about 4 to 5 feet tall. He said that it looked like it had no mouth. It was small enough that it didn't terrify him, just kind of disturbed him. All three boys told me that the creek area feels creepy, but being teenagers, they seem to get curious again, overcome their hesitations and go back, even though I request that they fish elsewhere. And later on, after talking to my son and making it clear that he's to stay out of the area, I asked him for any additional info that he could remember. He went into a little more detail that is, quite frankly, troubling. He described it as bald, having kind of a long neck. He reiterated that it moved impossibly fast. The image seems to be burned into his mind because he said the tree had 3 woodpecker-like holes in the trunk area of the tree that it was hiding behind. He said there were some weird sounds they heard as they were down at the creek that afternoon. They heard 2 owls calling each other in the middle of the day, which was not something that he really thought about until I confirmed that they were hooting multiple times back and forth at midday. One was high in a tree somewhere fairly nearby, so the boys actually hooted back and mimicked crow calls, just being silly as they fished. The second owl was in front of them in the direction of where the crawler that peeked behind the tree was spotted. My son said the owl hoots sounded very real, but he also noticed that the woods had gone quiet fairly shortly before he saw the crawler. He said that when they were first at the creek, there were squirrels running along the tree branches and bird song. He said the woods were quiet when he saw the thing peek from behind the tree, but there were owls hooting before that, which is how the owls even came up. His watch beeped, signaling the 4 o'clock hour, maybe 10 minutes before he saw the crawler, so he had a time reference for the event. The boys had heard a clicking noise a couple of times that he said did not sound wet and spitty like a human making a clicking noise, but more like a mechanical or dry noise, almost like a bug. He thought that it was some kind of bug that was weird enough that his ears picked up on it. They both heard clicking at least twice and agreed that it was some species of weird, annoying bug. I asked him if he had felt like he was being watched. He said no, but he did have a mild gut feeling of something slightly amiss when the birds and squirrels were quiet or absent, which he halfway noticed about the time that he was shouldering his pack seconds before seeing the crawler. As a mom, the idea that one, there could have been more than one, with all the hooting and clicking, and two, that things may have been making noise to get the boy's attention really bothers me. I'm not at all surprised that the woods had gone quiet. My son said both eyes faced forward on the crawler, which means that it's a predator, not a vegetarian. A couple of years ago, I just started college. Before that, I wasn't really doing anything with my life, but I was trying to act cool, wanting to be in the cool clique. At that time, I was having a fling-type relationship with a girl from my hometown. I really didn't find her attractive at all. I felt sorry for her, and we stuck together. Somehow, by pure chance, I started talking to this other girl from university that I had a crush on for a year. I saw her a couple of times while being out, always thinking that she and I would be perfect together. We go out and hit it off immediately. I fell in love almost from the get-go, like we're made for each other. Our humor, personalities, her looks, everything matches. But the girl was somehow weird. She told me stories about how often she went to fortune tellers and how gypsies on the street told her that she has the eyes of a nymph. Also, how every one of her exes had something tragic happen to them. One dying in a car crash, the other became depressed and ended his own life. Her roommates were also really unnerving. They would constantly talk about black magic and using menstrual blood and use it in spells to do stuff to men. I never thought anything of this, to be honest. I thought it was a bunch of BS, and we glided through the first couple of weeks. Weird things began to happen, though. I started to feel an immense amount of regret. I couldn't eat. I had trouble sleeping. I thought it was because of my old girlfriend, the one that I had a fling with. So I ended up talking to her, and I cut her off completely to focus on my new girlfriend. I had even more regret. I was eating myself from the inside, vivid, visceral dreams of my new girlfriend, in which she was always a giant, torturing me. These were very disturbing. It's a little TMI, but the sex was crazy. It was out of this world and something I've never replicated to this day. I finally tell her about the dreams, about the regret, everything. And then she says, I knew that all the time. And I was very confused. I didn't know what this meant, but she ended things then and there. I tried making amends, but she refused every time. I fell into a spiral of obsessive stalking, depression, melancholy, and sleep paralysis almost every night. Some dreams I've had were so real, like the time a creature was throwing me through my bedroom, or how the shadow of the tree outside my home had raven shadows with red eyes. Every time, I managed to at least get a hold of myself, and then somehow she would come back into my life and then leave again, and these things would repeat, like she was torturing me. I become ever more depressed and depraved, stalking her obsessively on social media. One time, I was out with a friend from my hometown. She tells me an almost identical story, but this time about how a boy was controlling her by magic. It was before that I was into anything paranormal or supernatural, so I was extremely skeptical. But the dreams continued. I kept having no energy for anything. I almost lost my job. I was literally thinking of ending my own life. This went on for 3 months. But then one day, I was waiting for a friend in a parking lot, and a gypsy woman approached me. I said I have no money, as I assumed she wanted change. She says that she didn't want money, but she sees that I was a deeply troubled person. She was beautiful and clean. If not for her ragged clothes, I would never even know that she was a gypsy. She tells me that I am madly in love with a girl, that I was stalking her, and that she was traveling right now. My ex was traveling at that point, Like I said, I was cyber stalking her, so I knew. She also guessed some very improbable things from our relationship. She described my ex to the point. I almost got scared. And then she hits me. She tells me that my ex spiked my drink with some blood ritual. I suddenly remember those stories about the blood they would use. She tells me that there is something dark in my flat, a gift of hers that she's using to leech energy off of me. I want to thank her, but she says not to worry, that she's glad to help. I tried coming to that parking lot a lot of times later, but I've never even seen her. None of the other gypsies in the neighborhood knew anybody by that description. I start running back to my flat. I forget about my friend and our plans. I start throwing out anything that could be a gift. I remembered a pair of pants, an old bottle of wine, a wallet that she gifted me. My stress began to reduce. I considered myself an idiot for believing the gypsy woman. But next week I feel a little better, but not even close to 100%. At least the dreams have reduced in size and intensity. I start to eat a bit better. I'm also finding the energy to clean my messy flat. I start cleaning absolutely everything as it was extremely messy, like 6 months of not being dusted. I decide to clean everything, my floor, my windows, rugs, the doorways, everything. Why not? While rubbing my door frame down with a towel, I look in the lock hole of my door. There's something in there, pushed in there very deeply. I find a toothpick and I pull it out. It's a black hair rubber band with about 10 to 15 strands of her hair tied into a weird shape. The color of the hair and the structure is the same as my ex. I get scared. I call my friend. She tells me to burn it immediately. I do so, still shaking. And then, a couple of months later, I'm better. Better than better. I meet a completely new girl, and we hit it off. Everything is well. I rarely ever think of this girl anymore. This is a true story. I hope somebody can shed light on this weird event that happened in my life. The other day, I decided to check her Instagram. I look at it, and I realize that she doesn't look at all how she looked when we were together. And I don't just mean different hair and makeup. That was different. But her eyes were a different color. Her face was a different shape. What the hell did she do to me? Does anyone else have a story about people using black magic on you? Way back in 2017, I think I had a really interesting encounter with what was either a mountain lion that somebody pumped full of PCP or some other thing. I'm leaning towards some other thing. I was staying at my parents' house for a couple of days. They lived in southern Wisconsin. They have internet, I don't. So I was playing some video games with friends. It was a long weekend, cheap alcohol, and good times. Anyways, we have a bizarre screeching noise that happens at night. It always sounds like a rabbit's death scream combined with the sound that a cat makes when you step on its tail. It's been happening since we moved here, years before when I was 14. It happens a lot more recently since I've come back. Sometimes it screeches all night long. I frequently go out and try to find it, but I never find anything. I think I maybe one time found weird tracks, but they could be from literally anything with feet. The instant I go outside, it stops, like just evaporates, leaving no trace. So anyways, I'm playing computer games and drinking with friends this night. The screeching starts outside, but at the time I was too busy to look. It gets even louder. My friends eventually all leave the house because they still have work and school. This thing is super pissed. It sounds like there's something hitting the house. This hasn't happened before. I go downstairs to where we have a screened porch. Mom is in the adjoining room. She asks if I've been hearing it. I nod to her that I have. The cat is on the screen porch with all its hair sticking straight out. He's mad. He's hissing and growling and everything else. And in my infinite drunken wisdom, I decide to hunt for the beast. My guns are at my house though. All I'm armed with is a mag light, my rat-killing pipe, and my BB gun. The second I go outside, the screeching stops, and I think of how I must look with my pipe and mag light and BB gun, and think, now this is operating. I also forgot to mention that I have no shoes on at this time. My mag light is off because I don't want to announce my presence that hard. I've got one overpressurized BB in the chamber. I'm ready for battle. I start my rounds of the property, thinking that maybe it's just a loud owl, or possibly a female Bigfoot getting rammed. Who the hell knows? But either way, it's getting shot. So as I'm doing my rounds, I hear shuffling in a tree. It's right by an outbuilding, so I'm able to sneak up in the shadow of the building. Whatever this thing is going to get popped with a BB, and then I'll introduce it to my rat-killing pipe. I maybe will leave its corpse so its friends know what happens when you mess with our property. I get about 4 feet away from the lower branches, and it doesn't sound like an owl anymore. It sounds like a person mumbling to themselves. Not words, just noises. And then I hear a wet noise, which at that point I decided that I have to see what this is. I turn on my mag light. Now I'm not fazed by much, but this really effed me up. I see this reddish gray thing with disjointed limbs. It has kind of a stubby snout thing, almost like there's no lips on the mouth. The next instant, after I flicked on the light, it snapped its head up at a crazy angle, screeched, and launched itself into another tree. I was full of liquid courage at the time, so I gave chase while shooting BBs at it. It jumped through a couple of trees until it lost me for a second, and then I truly no fear. I was in the dark, alone, with no real weapons, and I'm with whatever the hell this thing is. I reload and overpressurize a BB, and then this thing jumps out of the tree right over top of me. I drop the BB gun because I'm spooked. It runs over to the garage. There's only one tree on the other side of the garage. I whip around the corner as I grab my trusty rat-killing pipe. It was at this point that I realized I done goofed. I cornered an unknown, potentially violent animal after spending 8 minutes antagonizing it without a real weapon. I shine my mag light at it. It screeches even louder than usual. I'm close enough to this thing to see its throat vibrate when it screeches. It's got to come down now at this point. There's no way in hell that it can jump like 30 feet into a different tree, so it's either going to run or attack. Now I'm drunk, so my brain wasn't functioning properly, if that wasn't obvious by the fact that I chase animals around at night in my bare feet. So I decide to do what you're supposed to do to scare a mountain lion away. Only since I'm drunk, I do it wrong. I pull my shirt half off me so that it's inside out, but still around my neck. I'm holding the sleeves. I start screeching and spinning around, with my shirt over my head like a 6-year-old. It screeches back. I screech louder. I wind up running into the dog kennel because I can't see anything. Apparently, that spooked Mr. or Mrs. whatever it was. I hear vigorous shuffling and scampering. I rip my shirt off and prepare to get into a fist fight with this thing. But it's gone. It's completely gone. In fact, I also can't find my mag light, so there's no real way to check. I make my way back to the house in silence and darkness. We rarely ever hear the noise anymore, and if we do, it's always really far off, way off in the woods. Apparently, if you're drunk and stupid, you can possibly win the day here in Wisconsin. So like I said, those were pretty bizarre, weird, and terrifying altogether. If one of them stuck out to you, let me know which one it was down in the comments. If you have one of your own, feel free to send it to me at the email in the description below. And if you would like to donate to the channel, I have a PayPal and a Patreon down there as well as super thanks here on YouTube. And if you liked the video, then feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll put up a couple of other videos in case you want to watch another one. And with that, I thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching. Have a good week, and I'll see you in the next video.